Koka sunarai sunarayanti. 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 Koka sunarai sunarayanti.
Hello, welcome to the second episode of the Psychedelic Confessions. Today I'm very proud to have my friend Alejandro Lozano. Alessandro is an investment banker in a former life, and he spent the last 2 decades exploring new economic paradigms, psychedelics, classical tantra, and the challenges of relationships and family life. He's a dear friend, very inspiring. I often ask his opinion on those matters: economics, family, relationship. I thought that it was a great idea to follow up with him after having had Ethan Nadelman for these Psychedelic Confessions. Alejandro has kindly accepted to be open about his personal experience. I think it's important now that psychedelics are becoming so popular for people to hear from personal experience, not just from clinical trial or scientific report, but just from direct experience. Also, there's been now this medicine is so popular. We want also caution people that this is very mysterious in a way. Compound, and this experience can be compared to go hiking up into a volcano. You would not explore a volcano on your own. You would need to have a guide. And same thing for this compound. You would not want to explore your psyche without someone that can guide you. So this is not an encouragement to try recklessly. Also, another distinction that sometimes you don't find in press and television is that, this compound have very different effect if they are taking in small, medium, or high dose. Also, another distinction that needs to be kept in mind is the intention why you do that. The 3 typical distinctions are recreational, celebratory, for healing, and maybe mystical. So I would say 4. So like for the Eden podcast, I would like to structure this conversation going from compound to compound and hear what was Alejandro's experience. I will also share mine, maybe not for all of them because I don't want to repeat myself from the previous compound. Alejandro, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's good to be with a great friend talking about such interesting subjects. So let's go.
Let me read them real quick, and then we're going to go one by one. So today we're going to be talking about marijuana, MDMA, LSD, psilocybin, ayahuasca, DMT, 5-MeO-DMT, peyote, San Pedro, Iboga, Kanna, and Mambe. So let's go. What's your relationship with marijuana?
Okay, marijuana was probably the first on that list that I tried. It started recreationally, exploring with friends, and then in Spain there is a big tradition of smoking hashish, and that's probably the first thing I did. Then at one point I moved to Costa Rica, where there was a lot of marijuana. In Spain, it's a smoke with normally mixed with tobacco, and in Latin America it's a smoke on its own. And I learned that probably the mixing creates a very different effect. You got 2 psychoactive substances, tobacco also being very addictive, but also changing the nature of the experience. So for me, it was an eye-opener that the marijuana experience I really had not had. I had the marijuana plus tobacco experience. And then in Latin America, in Costa Rica and other countries in Latin America, I came in contact with marijuana by itself, which created a very different experience. I smoke to relax and to get into this very nice space. Very soon I found out that with marijuana less is more. I would smoke every day, and then that effect that had attracted me to the plant maybe was not there anymore. Also, at times I could notice an effect on my work routine. I would start to see the dark side of marijuana in terms of less initiative, less drive, maybe a more passive attitude towards life, and so on. So I had a dance with the plant in which soon after I started smoking pot, I realized that it could also be a trouble relationship, and I needed to keep some distance or to manage a rhythm. And I heard from some people with much more experience than me that if you want to maximize your marijuana positive intake, or you want to maximize the positive effect of marijuana, and when I say maximize is to have as much as possible of that positive effect, the most you can smoke is every other day. That will be. I heard that from someone that had much more experience than me at the time. I was in my 20s, and I tried to stick to that. I ended up not smoking during weekdays because I noticed the effect in my work. At the time I was starting a company and I needed a lot of drive. And so I had to learn. There was a learning curve with marijuana in which I had to do less and less of it versus that initial stage in which I fell in love with the plant and the effect it had in me, and I just had lots of friends who smoke and we were just smoking all the time. I guess that didn't work for me longer term, so I had to learn to smoke less and less, and now it's a plant that I do rarely. I do very little of. Also because this mixture with tobacco, which is it's not on the list, but I've had a long and troubled relationship with a plant that is also a very interesting plant in many ways. And I think when mixed with marijuana, the negative effects of both get multiplied, and as you get the pull of the tobacco or the addiction of the tobacco mixed with the effect of the marijuana, and it doesn't work for me. So I in the last years I've stayed mostly away with some. There's some times where I do some, but I have to stop soon because I do notice that the effect is not what I'm looking for. But if I had to summarize my learning with marijuana, is definitely less is more. It's a beautiful plant, but you shouldn't do too much of it.
Yeah. It's Graham Hancock says that every plant has a personality. So the ayahuasca is the loving grandmother, the peyote or the Iboga is the stern grandfather, and marijuana is the trickster spirit that tricks you in you wanting more and more. So it's very used to abuse. I know very few people that can really use it without abusing it. So it's a tricky one. And since we're here, I want to share. We had Santo Daime ayahuasca experience recently, and Santo Daime recognized Santa Maria as a sacred plant, and some part of the church allow officially the plant during the ayahuasca ceremony. And so I take a break. I was out of the dome, and someone offered me a puff of cannabis. I couldn't refuse, but I felt my energy immediately from the ayahuasca energy of being solemn in a way, where you feel like almost you feel like being in a church. You feel like you are under the like a divine presence. The cannabis immediately create the distortion into the trickstery, and immediately start feeling with good mood, but with almost cheekiness. And immediately I start to perceive the environment rather than an environment solemn where people grow and connect with source. I start connecting with the judgment mind. And so I agree, it's a tricky one.
I have to say, with the combination of marijuana and ayahuasca, it's interesting. I did it for a while. I did both together, and a little marijuana before the ayahuasca opens yourself, in my experience, to the experience of ayahuasca quite nicely. So sometimes our controlling ego, maybe on the way, it needs to be overcome to really go in the ayahuasca flow, and a little marijuana does help with that. Also, part of my experience with marijuana sometimes is my own relationship with the plant, where the judging mind comes in, is because I have an issue with my relationship with the plant, and then I very rapidly go into, I've done something that gets me in trouble sometimes, trouble being not being in the optimal space where I want to be, and not having the best relationship I can have with it. And sometimes it's my mind also does something similar to that, but I tend to look at it as more like my own maybe a judgment on my inability to get a healthy relationship with the plant, and immediately go into this judgment of myself taking the plant as, maybe it was not good, I should have not taken it, and so on.
But for me, it was the judgment of the environment, of what are these people doing. It was like a sense of, it took away the sacred. That's what it does to me. It creates some euphoria and good mood, but I tend to press people's button, especially my wife, which once said, listen, either you stop, otherwise you're becoming unbearable. But what about MDMA? Now, as you know, they expect to be legal in America in the next 2 years for PTSD predominantly. What's your personal experience?
Well, I started taking MDMA recreationally, and again, I went from some early experimentation to then years later a phase of my life where I started to take a lot of it in a celebratory setting, like parties and so on. Again, as many other substances, it has diminishing returns as you take more of it. I also soon realized, I started to feel that with MDMA I was borrowing from the future. Like I will get these peak states in which I will feel connected to everyone and everything, and I will just feel very good about myself. But then a couple of days later I will have a down where the opposite, will be moody, and the opposite will be true. And that again introduced sort of the limit and how much MDMA I wanted to take. I never treated it as medicine. It was really recreational. It was I just wanted to get high. I didn't feel I was healing myself in any way with MDMA. And then many years later, when I had started sort of a different path, a different relationship with psychedelics in general, and I had gotten in contact with plant medicine and so on, I had this experience with MDMA and psilocybin, this very healing medicinal experience. And when the facilitator of the medicine said it was going to give us a high dose of MDMA with a high dose of psilocybin in a blindfold setting with music and different types of vibrations and so on, I asked, I said, but aren't you borrowing from the future with the, is this really medicine in the sense that it makes you feel better afterwards, or is it something? And what he said resonated a lot with me and with my experience ever since. He says MDMA wants to take you inside, but we use it in social settings where we are constantly going outside, where we're socializing, talking, relating to other people, dancing, lots of visual stimulation and so on. And in his words, that's very taxing for the mind. So I've, since that conversation and that experience, I've taken on a few occasions MDMA by itself or with psilocybin in a very calm and relaxed setting, or even to have a deep conversation with my wife. And it's been not only a great experience and a healing medicinal experience, but also it has not produced a hangover. It has not produced the rebound effect of a couple days later. So I do think that in this case, as always, set and setting are very important and affect the not only the quality of the experience, but the aftermath of the experience, and have effects in the chemistry going on in your brain during the experience and in the days after. So MDMA, I think I discovered it early as a recreational drug, and much later as a medicine, and I've learned to see its potential, its medicinal potential, in the last years. And in my experience, it's very important that to go inside with MDMA, to not go outside.
Yeah, for me it was very useful for couple therapy. It feels that it really helps to allow you to see a situation from the other person's point of view, which that can be very helpful in a domestic setting. And I was in Burning Man a long time ago with Sasha Shulgin, who synthesized MDMA, and he said, you can only do it once a year.
Oh, wow.
And then I was like a little bit disappointed. I was like, oh my God, is it too late? And then Rick Doblin from MAPS said that, to avoid the dopamine depletion, the Tuesday blues, the 2 days after the experience, you just have to not cope, not dealing with problems, just take a day off, walking in nature, and that would avoid the serotonin depletion of the 2 days after. But yes, it's definitely taxing on your body, and it's you are boring from the future, as you say.
Well, I guess if you do it once a year, you then take 2 days off, and you go inside, you will be fine.
So it's not weekend drugs. That's the message too. LSD.
LSD, I hold LSD very dear, with a very important place in my life, because I used to work in finance. I started a merchant bank with other partners. We were doing lots of M&A and private equity, and I was really in that world of making money and chasing success. And I was quite young. I was in my late 20s. We were doing very well. We was based in Costa Rica at the time, and we were being very successful in the business. And then I had my first LSD experience, and there were certain elements that maybe were not. They were taking a back seat, but they were definitely sharing the ride with me, which, I didn't find much meaning in what I was doing. Just I was not asking myself questions about meaning. So it was not apparent to me. But once I took the LSD, a lot of things happened, and a lot of things that were maybe taking that back seat or being somewhere in the back of my mind came to the front and made me take some life-changing decisions. It also, LSD opened widely the doors of perception for me and made me suddenly, I couldn't take for granted lots of things that I had taken for granted, including a material reality, objective reality outside. It humbled me a lot. I was not so sure of anything anymore. I also had a beautiful experience. I was in heaven, but I also was in hell. I had a very frightening experience too. It was in that sense a very complete journey in which the best and the worst, the easy and the difficult took place. And I came out of it a changed man. And I also came out of it taking a very different look at my life and realizing that I wanted something else. So that experience was that was a pivotal moment, and it was very instrumental. LSD was instrumental in making me take some life-changing decisions. I decided to leave finance. I decided to retire from the world of finance at the age of. It took me 2 or 3 years to do it, but it was out of that experience that I decided I didn't want to stay just making money and doing deals and mergers and acquisitions and so on, and so LSD was had a huge impact in my life, and it was the first strong psychedelic experience, the first opening of the doors of perception, and it also, a different Alejandro came out of that experience, I guess. So very important to me.
Amazing. Would you remember the dosage? Was that a full dose?
Well, it was a funny story. Somebody had given me LSD in paper, and it was a beautiful. It had a beautiful pink heart and angels, and it, like a lot of a very beautiful picture on it. And somebody gave it to me as a present, and someone very loving that was very grateful for something I had done. I don't remember the details, but it came as a like a beautiful present from someone. But I had never tried it, and I just kept it. And then this friend of mine visited me, and in Costa Rica. We had met recently, but we had become friends very, very rapidly. And he said, "Oh, if we had some LSD, it would be so amazing." So I have some, so we can take, let's take half. And he said, no, let's go for the full thing. So let's go get another one. And I found myself with him in the streets of San Jose, looking for LSD, not knowing where to look. And after some adventures, we ended up with another LSD. But this one was the opposite. It was very dark, and it has a skull on it, and it was a completely different presentation. One had all the symbols and elements of positivity and love, and the other one had the symbols and elements of darkness. And then, I wanted to take my one with the beautiful heart, but my friends say, no, because then we will have different trips. Let's do half and half, so we take the same. Okay, so I took half and half, and funnily enough, I had this heaven and hell experience, and I just took a full LSD, would probably be 120 mix, maybe it was 200, maybe it was, I had no idea. I've never had such a strong LSD experience ever again, and it's probably because of that first experience and how strong it was for me. I became very interested in psychedelics. I've taken LSD many times after that, but it's the one substance that I haven't taken in large doses ever since. I've probably taken 120 mg. I do a lot of microdosing. I've taken LSD many, many times, but with every other substance, I go very easily into hero dosage and then take a lot just to see what happens. And somehow with LSD, I'm a little more cautious after that first experience.
But so what would you think is the mechanism? We know that LSD, like other tryptamines, they weakens the default mode network in your brain, which now neuropsychopharmacologists with these new fMRI machines, right, functional magnetic resonance imagery, they show that the default mode network connect these three key area, and is the closest thing to the anegoic armor. So the tryptamines reduce the blood supply, so it's like the director of the orchestra of your brain went to bed. So without the tightness of your egoic structure, that's how you can see yourself outside the rat race of the finance. In which way the LSD show you the limit of that occupation, of that life? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, I think over the years, through my readings and psychedelic experiences and meditation and so on, I've accepted, I've taken as my own the narrative or the view where consciousness is the one thing that exists, the one reality, and the brain is a filtering mechanism. And in a way, there will be this absolute consciousness, this mind at large that people refer to maybe as a god, and then that mind at large can have the experience, the limited experience, the localized experience of any one of us, the egoic experience of experiencing the world through the senses and making sense of it. But that's a filtering mechanism. That's so I think these tryptamines definitely, in my view, what they do is they take out the filter to some degree, and then you start this expanded consciousness, this state of expanded consciousness. That's what happens when you take the filter out. So in a way, and with LSD that happens too, and I think it just it completely shattered my previous assumptions about everything that were implicit. Like, I had taken, my parents were atheists and materialists, and, like science was the ultimate provider of the truth. And it's easy to take that view to scientism and to assume that there is an objective material external world that then you experience through the senses, and with the scientific method you sort of learn about it, and you can manage that reality, or you can play with it. That first dosage of LSD shattered that. Now I was agnostic. I was not. Now I didn't know. Now I realized that the reality, I had a very strong experience in which I realized that what I took as real was being formed in my mind, not outside. And then, of course, that also guided some reading where I started to come across narratives that describe the world in different terms. And that whole thing, I mean, it was not I didn't come out of the experience thinking I have to leave finance, because I had an aha moment in which, okay, what I need to do with my life is this other thing. It's just that I came out of it completely not sure of anything, very, very thrilled about the prospects of exploring a much wider realm. And my previous goals and aspirations, my previous life seemed quite limited with regard to the enormous potential that had been put on display suddenly. Suddenly I could not see life in the same terms I was seeing it before. And that led very soon to me wanting to change my life. But it was not that during the LSD experience I realized that it was wrong to work in finance. No. It was just that I came out of it thinking, oh my God, this is so little compared to everything.
So much more.
So much more to life and to reality and to everything, yeah.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I just want to clarify something, because there's a bit of confusion when you said, like, your parents were materialist. Materialism in this context is not accumulation of material things. It's scientific materialism, which is the current paradigm, where we believe that consciousness evolved through the evolution of biological, from a single cell amoeba, we then became humans, and consciousness came as an epiphenomenon in the brain. This is the current view of the current scientific paradigm, which is called scientific materialism. And what Alejandro is doing, and I agree, is that the opposite is that no, consciousness did not came from the single cell amoeba that then developed into a sophisticated brain that created consciousness. Consciousness came before matter, before the Mambe. There was some sort of mind at large that then out of which came matter. I mean, things are not provable both sides, but I just feel that a view of reality that can be called idealism, or this idea of a consciousness that came before matter has an enormous implication in terms of how you want to live your life, what you think about previous life and cosmogenetic, morphogenetic fields and telepathy and transpersonal psychology. There is a big impact on how this view of reality can affect your life. That was great, thank you. Psilocybin, you touched a little bit on it with MDMA, but only with mushroom. What's your relationship?
I started again recreationally. Somebody brought some mushrooms, and we took them, and it was one of the best moments in my life. It was also in Costa Rica. We were in a beautiful setting by the jungle with a swimming pool with great views and a nice group of people, and we were just laughing and having so much fun, and it was incredible. Also, by then I had already had my LSD experience, and this somehow was more manageable. It was a much easier ride. It stayed only on the positive. I didn't visit the realms of hell, and it was really nice. So I started to do it occasionally, based more on availability, like how easy it was for me. Sometimes I was in places where I didn't know how to get mushrooms or psilocybin, and sometimes they became available, and then I took them. And again, it was a recreational. I think I've gotten into these substances like wanting to have fun, like recreationally. But very soon, once the doors of perception were open with LSD, I was also an explorer. I wanted to explore these altered states of mind, this expanded consciousness. And we're mixing the two. Like sometimes we'll take mushrooms and be dancing on some party on the beach. But sometimes I will take them with just one friend, and we will sit in the garden and just have a higher dose of mushrooms and go into a more meditative mushroom experience. And we'll still laugh a lot, and we will still, have a very good time. So for me, it was not, was still recreational, but somehow it had to do more with exploring the realms of the mind. Both with mushrooms and LSD, over the years, I learned to also microdose on them, like versus like taking the full amount. And I think that's microdosing is a very interesting way to relate to these substances. It's not some people present it as a panacea, as like the answer for everything. You just have better days, and you can have it over and over and over. I think I've explored like continuous microdosing for long periods of time. In my experience, for me, it was better to stop. I think it's very important to touch base somehow, because one thing that has become more important in my life, and I guess that comes more from my tantric practice, there is like achieving peak state in itself is not anymore my objective. We all can enjoy a nice peak state, but what I really aim for is changing my default state, and that's much harder. You can have a peak state every week with any of these substances, with ayahuasca, and still remain in the same place, go back to the same default, with the same issues, with the same challenges, with the same. And I think it's very important in my relationship with these substances, the integration, the long-term effect these things have on me is what I care more about now. And I think sometimes, microdosing can lead you to some fundamental changes in your life in the same way that ayahuasca ceremonies can, or you can get stay doing microdosing and having the same life, but with microdosing forever, and then you stop the substance and you are, You were moody before, you're moody again. If you were triggered before, you're triggered again. And it's, okay, when you take psilocybin or LSD in a microdose, you get less triggered. Nice. But if you stop, you get as triggered as before. There hasn't been a change in your life. So now I do use all these substances. I microdose on them. I go on and off on these substances, but I'm always trying to integrate the information I receive or the changes that take place in ways that allow me to slowly move my default state, and I try to be as aware as I can of whether that is happening or not, and what's leading to the changes I want, and so on.
The most common protocol for microdosing psilocybin has been designed by James Fadiman, and his protocol is either 0.20, from 0.10 to 0.25, according to your weight. Basically, the amount should stop just before you feel it. It should be sub-perceptual every 3 days for 10 weeks. So I agree that it should be a set period and not like, open, not forever.
With psilocybin, I also had another interesting I once took, I think, 8 grams, a big dose. And it was probably the first time that I lost control. I could have ended up running naked through the streets. I was in a forest with friends, and that was not a possibility. But I really lost control. I was not in control anymore, and that was interesting because a lot of things happen, and I realized afterwards nothing dramatic or nothing, but I realized how out of control I had been, and that maybe is taking 5-MeO-DMT buffos to not be in control. Like normally, in any of the experiences, I'm in a flow. I'm not in controlling mode, but I'm there, present, and what happens. I still have a great degree of influence over what happens. With this big dose of magic mushrooms, I lost it in a way, and that again was a humbling experience for me. It was the first time I felt that way, and I could have, if that had happened in a public setting, I could have ended up in I was really not managing the situation.
But did you feel you had a ego death experience? You lost your sense of identity?
Not that time. I just, in a way, I got lost on the trip. I lost the connection to, let's say, consensus reality, and I was in a journey where I took for real things that maybe for outside observers were not real, and I reacted to that reality that only I was experiencing, and then that was my reality, and I didn't have, there was no bridge to the consensus reality that normally I can be having very strong psychedelic experience, but I still am fully aware, okay, I'm in this setting, this is the result of me smoking DMT or whatever, and it's okay. Here, I just got, I don't know, I got lost in a different reality, and again, that was a first for me. It's the only time where that has happened, and it was with psilocybin.
And what was the teaching when you think about that experience? What did it brought you, think?
Well, generally with that experience, and also this has happened. I've gone many times. This different substance on the list, but I've gone many times to the Amazon to diet on ayahuasca and other plant medicine, and I've gone through very strong experiences. And one message that I come out of these experiences with is it's all the stories you create in your mind. In the tantric test, they call them vikalpas, is mental constructs. So at one point, you may be under the influence of these substances, convinced that whatever is true, and you see it so clear, and now you've connected all the dots, and now, oh my God, this is what is happening, or this is the way things are. And then a few days later, you look at it and you go, no, that's that's the story, the mental construct I came up with during that big experience, and but the level of certainty that I had during those moments, those mental constructs I took for reality themselves. And they are not, whether you take substances or not, that learning I've taken with me, and I think is probably the biggest learning I've taken from my experiences with psychedelics, is so we don't see the world, we see our thoughts reflected in the world. And somehow it's good to remain, it's a humbling exercise. It's like, just remember that you are creating the reality that you take for reality. Well, that just a mental construct. That's your thoughts reflected on the world.
It's your perception.
It's your perception, and but not only perception, it's the story you're putting on that perception. You're creating a story, and you're taking that story for reality, and it's just a story. Whether you've taken psychedelics or not, but sometimes with psychedelics, the story, it becomes this big aha moment. Okay, now I understand everything. This is the way things are. And then, no, again, that was just a story. And that's, I guess that was the teaching from that and other big experiences with high dosages is... but again, I apply it whether I've taken nothing in the last month and I still have this story in my mind of why I'm having this problem with my wife or this situation in business or whatever. It's just a story. Mm-hmm. It's not reality.
Yeah, no, this is very important concept. Thank you. So let's continue with ayahuasca. You said you did a couple of dieta. What's your relationship with ayahuasca?
I had heard about this substance from friends, and it looked... I was studying an MBA near Paris in Fontainebleau, and I had this Chilean friend whose sister had gone to what years later I realized was the Santo Daime in Brazil, and live in community with them, smoking pot and drinking ayahuasca. When I heard that story, I thought it was like really extreme. It was this very, very strong psychedelic plant that I felt it was like out of my league at the time. And years later, I was living in Colombia, spending a lot of time there, and a good friend of mine shared with me what I thought was a beautiful story of his first experience with ayahuasca. And this friend, when he was like 18, 19 years old, he had a very big fight with his father, a terrible fight, a fight in which his father came to tell him something that my friend didn't want to hear, and then he reacted very aggressively towards his father and speaking in a very nasty way to him, and what are you talking about? You're an alcoholic and you're a failure and this and that. And then he left the house and went to a friend's place in this terrible fight. And then his father died in a car accident 2 days later. So that was his farewell to his father. And of course, he realized also his father was right on that occasion. It was him that was wrong. His father was only trying to help. And his father was not a bad father. He was, just human, like the rest of us, with his failings. But it was not. So he had that chip in his shoulder, like, what a terrible way to have, the last exchange with your father had been as bad as it could be. And then your father had died, and that was the last memory he kept of his son. And, he carried on with his life. He married, had a daughter, and he had a good life, but there was a chip in his shoulder. And then in his first ayahuasca experience, his father came to him, saying, now you have a daughter, now you realize it doesn't matter, I love you, gave him a hug, and, they hugged, he said sorry, he cried. And that was that was his first ayahuasca experience. I when I heard this, I said, I want to try it. That's now I had a beautiful story to take me. So I went with another friend in Colombia to the jungle.
And that was before or after your LSD experience?
We were in this place in total darkness, and there was this shaman or facilitator that with a flute that will play the flute every now and then, pew pew, but very little, and complete darkness. And I took it and I started purging like mad, like both ways. I was vomiting and shitting all night basically, and then I got a headache. And nothing, no insight, no father coming to say anything, no, like just a terrible headache after lots of time in the toilet.
You had lost your dad also.
I lost my dad when I was 10, but I was not going to the experience to have anything.
That's why you resonate with your friends.
But it was not what drove me. I just thought, oh, this is very interesting medicine. What happened to my friend? I didn't have a fight with my father before he died, so I didn't have.
But the idea of reconnecting with him was compelling, maybe.
Maybe, but no, it was not what was driving me. I guess I would just wanted to experience the thing, and the experience was massive purging as I never experienced in my life, and then a terrible headache. So I didn't understand anything. My friend, I said, well, dude, what's going on? And he said, respect the yagé. They call yagé, ayahuasca yagé in Colombia. I said, okay, I'll respect it, but I don't understand. This is, okay, purging. And this was 20 years ago. So now the use of ayahuasca is much more widespread. Now there's much more literature, references, stories of friends. At the time, I didn't have any of that. So it was my first experience, and I wouldn't say it was a positive one from my limited perspective at the time. Then I came back to Cartagena, where I had my home at the time. And almost everybody I met will tell me, "Oh, you look changed," with a big smile in their face. So I was receiving this, and I felt light. I felt good in the following days. So suddenly, I look at the experience, the not so pleasant experience I had, as a really positive experience, and I wanted to do more. Then I came to Ibiza, and I connected to the ayahuasca world here in Ibiza. I started to do ceremonies here. Second time, it was like big MDMA, like just loving everybody. And the third time, I danced with God. I had a beautiful mystic experience that then I had on almost every occasion for the next 100 times or whatever. Then I started to go into dietas. I started to drink by myself. I started to go deeper and deeper with the medicine. And I have to say, again, if what you look for, in my experience always, if what you look for is changes in your default state, changes like permanent changes in your life, I think going deeper is better, in the sense it's better to do a few days in a row. It's better to go in a dieta. It's better, like you can do many ceremonies once in a while, and that will have less effect. I'm not saying it will not have an effect. Of course it will, but the deeper you go, with deeper being staying longer in the medicine, going for more days or dieting, that will probably, I've had some very big fundamental changes in the way I see things, in the way I relate to my wife, in the way after going deep in the jungle for a few weeks. And that, in my experience, that hasn't happened to me in a single ceremony, in a single session. In a single session, I've had a beautiful experience. I had this big fight with a friend and partner in a business that didn't go well, and things got complicated both on the business side and on the personal side, and we, from a very close relationship, we had grown apart, and we had We had a bad fight. We were sort of divorced. And I felt really hurt. I felt betrayed and hurt, deeply hurt. And I couldn't, it was very painful. And I was resentful. I couldn't understand why my friend had treated me that way. And I went into ceremony, and I experienced during the session, I experienced the whole thing from his side. And I realized everything I was feeling about him, he was feeling about me. And everything I thought he had done to me, I had done to him. So I came out of that ceremony, gave him a call, got together, hugged him, apologized for my part of this, and somehow that was very insightful, and that was a beautiful example of things that can happen to you when you take the medicine. So I think it was a very practical and beautiful outcome of a single ceremony.
I mean, how important is that, right? If imagine a lot of misery in the world comes from misunderstanding, I think. Because you mentioned, like, dancing with God, that kind of transcendence, mystical experience. I know it's difficult to put it in words, but can you try to describe that feeling? What does it mean, dance with God? How does it make you feel?
I guess it's a mystical experience that is very positive, pleasurable. You're feeling lots of love. It comes normally with ayahuasca. It comes with some beautiful visuals too, and it comes with this sense of complete well-being and peace and flow and connection to everything and being one with everything. I realize after using some other substances that there's still an observer. There's still a me separated from the world that feels very connected to everything. It's not the real experience of oneness. It's not the ineffable experience that when you merge with it, and then any words you put into it fail to describe because words are limited. It's not that. It's I call it dancing with God. It's just a beautiful, mystical, elevated experience somehow, where I do feel the divine very strongly, but there's still the observer. There's still a me separated from the rest of the world, having this beautiful experience of connection and divinity and so on. And for many years, I will go almost on every session with ayahuasca. I will go there, and I wouldn't have. It would be very rare that I had challenging situations with ayahuasca. It was mostly this dancing with God situation, and then lately, in the last years, it's become. It happens less. I go there, but to, let's say, a lesser degree, and I'm doing a little less of the medicine lately, and probably part of the explanation is I'm getting less powerful insights, less mystical experiences out of it. Still very nice experiences. I do more and more meditation while doing ayahuasca. I try to get less carried by my thoughts and be more on an observant role. But let's say the peak is a lower peak than in my initial experiences or my experiences for many years.
Yeah, I have the same situation with ayahuasca. My wife and I, we had a practice for 7 years, quite intense. We do 2-3 retreats per year, and we both had specific condition to address. And I would say that we successfully addressed them. And now, for me at least, it's sometimes more like a collective experience. It's more, feeling connected to people you love and developing trust and feeding from the collective rather than the personal experience. This is great. I knew that with you we would have needed a little bit more time, but it's fine, people can pause and come back, because usually we keep it at an hour, but I think this is going to be an hour and a half. So people can pause and come back. The next is DMT. So DMT is the active component of one of the plant of the concoction, ayahuasca, that you can smoke. Tell us about your experience with DMT.
Okay, my first connection to DMT was through ayahuasca, and then I smoked changa for the first time in a high dose.
So changa is the mixture between DMT and some other herbs.
Yes, and that was a very intense and order of magnitude, several orders of magnitude more intense experience that the experience with DMT in ayahuasca. Maybe a 20-minute experience or 15-minute experience in which I did travel into other dimensions and met the entities I had heard some friends talking about for so long, but that in my ayahuasca experiences, some things could be entities, but it was you could interpret the experience in different ways, and some of the visuals or some of the things that were happening could be interpreted to be entities, but not necessarily so. With this DMT experience, I did go into another dimension where there were some beings that I could see in perfect detail and interact with, and that was profound. That was intense. I also, if I tell this story to my mother, she will just say that's an hallucination, and it may be. But the way I lived that experience, I have been in a different realm, in a different dimension where there are other beings, and I have interacted with them. So I did experience that. Some of the experiences could be described as having great frightening potential, in the sense that the entities themselves, it was an intense experience to interact with them.
But would you say they were benevolent or malevolent? What is the nature of this interaction?
I don't know. I think benevolent or malevolent, in my case, in my experience, that would be some judgment on my side. They didn't display obvious signs of benevolence or malevolence to me. I've had experiences in which the entities seemed very curious and were just looking at me and exploring me. I've had instances in which some entities that could be part of any horror movie came running towards me and ate me. That I didn't allow myself to go into fear, and I could just breathe through the experience and just experience it. But there is nothing. There is nothing that says to me that was an entity trying to do you harm, or trying to steal your soul, or trying to. All those are narratives and stories. Maybe it was an entity just very curious about you that then runs towards you, and because it has many legs and elements that that you see in horror movies, you could see that as an attack. But I have no. I don't. I think another learning I've had in these experiences and with people close to me and the experiences they've had and so on, again, is what you do with the experience. Like, we tend to put labels, and we tend to, again, have mental projections, mental constructs on top of the experience. So if you see something that looks like a spider running towards you, it's very easy to interpret that as an attack. But it may be an entity with the form of a spider, or that in your mind comes with the form of a spider, just running towards you with enormous curiosity towards you. And I think in this experience, there's this. I read it in a Joseph Campbell book, but I don't know who is the originator of this quote. But there's the mystic swims in the sea where the psychotic drowns. I think at the end of the day, one thing that I found very useful for me is to breathe and remain centered through these experiences. When we talk about heroic doses and we talk about very intense experiences, I think it's a good idea to just witness them and not
identify with them.
Not identify, not let your mind put the stories on top of it that then you take for reality. Just go through it. And by the way, that's also, I think that's also good advice for life in general. So if you can see this as training sessions in which then the things that happen in life that sometimes are more challenging than others, also try to be centered, try to breathe, and try to witness what's going on.
Yeah, that's very useful. There are lots of life lesson here through the lines of the psychedelic personal experience description. The distinction between malevolent and benevolent, it's so radically put in our Western psyche from religion, right? To have the devil and the angel. So yeah, that's a very interesting realm to understand. Are those entity independent sentient beings that they're just other dimensional or interdimensional, that they're there all the time and we can only access them when we are under the effect, and can our relationship with them improve humans' affair? As you know, a dear friend of ours is now sponsoring a clinical trial where he persuaded a prestigious university psychedelic laboratory to inject a healthy volunteer with DMT for a long time, with the anesthetic machine. So it's not just a shot of like an injection the last 20 minutes. It can be up to an hour, 2 hours. So in a future episode, when the experiment starts, I'll tell you more about it. But, some people believe that, there are definitely entities out there. And like in the movie Arrival, Denis Villeneuve sent us this big, like octopus-like entity that not only they were benevolent, but they actually helped Earth to avoid the Third World War, right, in that movie. So that's definitely interesting. And our friend says, how is it possible that NASA spends, I don't know how many billion or trillion to explore and kaleidoscope machines and big observatory that cost billions, and then don't even try to explore more connection with the, entities through this compound. But we're getting there. Okay, just to stay on the family of DMT, there is another type of DMT called 5-MeO, which comes from the poison secreted by this toad from the Sonora Desert. So basically, you scare the toad eject this liquid, usually on a piece of glass. Then you let it dry. You scratch it, and again, like DMT, you smoke it. How is that different from the entity DMT, and how was your personal experience?
Well, again, with DMT, no matter how high the dose I've tried, I still was there to have the experience. That means
With which one? With the entity DMT?
With DMT, yeah, with normal DMT. NDMT is the correct name. With 5-MeO DMT, which comes from the secretion, the poison of this Sonora Desert toad, but can also be found in plants in the Amazon. They take it as jopo, they call it in Venezuela, Colombia, and Brazil. And this one it has a different quality. There is a threshold experience, like if you take in small amounts, it will induce a meditative state. If you go above a certain threshold, it will induce an ineffable experience. This one, the observer disappears. Let's say you merge into the source or whatever. Again, whatever words, we lack words because words, by definition, create duality, and this is a non-dualistic experience for sure. I'd say that's the strongest experience I've ever had. I had this very dear friend of mine was diagnosed with cancer, and at one point he was doing all the conventional Western medicine treatments, but he was also doing lots of alternative treatments, some poison of some scorpion somewhere, this, that. And as part of these alternative treatments, he did a very high dose of kambo, this little frog in the Amazon that has very beneficial effects in your immune system. And it is a not pleasant experience. You fall sick when you get the poison of the frog. And he did a very large dose, so he felt really, really bad. And he came back from that experience saying, I've seen the face of death, and I didn't like it. He came horrified by the experience. Months later, before Bufus, before 5-MeO-DMT had arrived in Ibiza and other places, he told me he had the experience with Bufus in Mexico. And he said, remember, I told you I had seen the face of death and I didn't like it. Now I've seen the face of eternity, and it's awesome. It's great. So again, I want some, and I tried it shortly afterwards, and wow! I guess if I came back to life for a single day with a memory of this life, to a desert island, and I could only take one substance with me, that would probably be it, because it's the one substance where I guess I've seen the face of eternity, and I've merged with the source, and whatever words you want to throw at it is ineffable. You cannot describe it with words, but it's a very, very interesting experience. Also because you come back from it, and in the coming back, for me, I had no doubt whatsoever in my heart that this reality we live in was the illusion, and that I had been in the true reality. And again, a reductionist, materialist scientist will say you were hallucinating. Okay, fine, but I know in my heart, and in terms of subjective experience, I know I've been in something that is more real than what I experience every day, and I've seen very clearly as this reality was formed on top of that reality, and reality is the illusion, I guess, and I lived through that. So that the learning that came with that, the profound learning. I also, very interestingly, because with all these substances, I think it's like brief peeks beyond. Like they let you glimpse at other realities, other ways of understanding reality. And a lot of people say, okay, but you can achieve the same with 20 years of meditation, and it's true. And there's probably I would even say a better quality of achieving certain states of mind, certain states of consciousness through meditation without the use of any substance. There's something probably good about that versus the use of the substance. The beautiful thing in my experience is these substances, when I've had these limited short experiences of something beyond, I've come back wanting to meditate more. And somehow I don't see either or. I see the substances constantly reinforce my practice, and they tell me when I go with the ayahuasca, with the bufus, with the DMT, I come back and I have to meditate more, and I do meditate more. So in a way, it's like going. If we were able to teletransport ourselves, with some substance to the top of the Himalayas, or to Mount Everest, to the peak top, and observe the world from there. And I say, well, yeah, but there is some quality to actually climbing the mountain that you're missing with that experience, and that is. I say, okay, yes, but now, because I've been there for a few seconds, now I really want to climb that mountain. And I think that's definitely what's happening in my life. And in that sense, I don't see one thing excludes the other in any way. So the Bufus experience, the 5-MeO experience, has been probably the most transcendental experience I can think of. And it's made me meditate more, be more conscious of my breathing.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I got goosebumps when I was listening to you because I had a similar experience. Actually, I think we were in the same room. I felt also. Someone said feels like touching the heart of God, and I had also the most beautiful and important moment of my life with Fave Mio. I felt this like a infinite sea of compassion and forgiveness. I think it's the closest thing to heaven, and I couldn't speak for several hours after that, and then also. At the end of all this integration, there was something a little bit more practical, but still very useful, that happened to me, like it happened to you. I had also had a business disagreement with a friend about building something, and in that moment, I completely saw the whole thing from his point of view, and that was also facilitated the reconciliation. Okay, peyote.
Okay, peyote, I've had a few ceremonies that I found beautiful in every way. It's somehow, I feel it to be like a great heart opener and probably more grounding than ayahuasca, but in many ways similar nature. Like you can... less visual maybe in my case, but ceremonies that are medicinal, that make you feel better afterwards. In the following days, for me that's one easy way to know when we're talking about medicine versus drugs is whether is it addictive in the sense that it creates craving for it, and the medicine should not. And also is how do you feel afterwards? Is it do you need to recover from it, or actually you come out a better husband, better father, better friend, better partner, and so on? And I think peyote in that sense is similar to ayahuasca in that it's ceremonial settings in which you come out better, and there's healing involved and so on. I've also... with peyote, and like there's this cousin of peyote, San Pedro, that also has mescaline as one of the alkaloids involved. I like to microdose on them. I've also done some recreational use. I think some people reject or dislike the use of sacred plants for recreational purposes. I don't subscribe to that. I respect that view, but I think at the end of the day, the experiences are it's so much nicer to use these substances for recreational purposes than to use the ones accepted by society at large, like alcohol. I think nobody sees a problem with drinking wine and then or mezcal or vodka or whatever in the celebration of a birthday, and say, well, I can take a little peyote, or I can take little mushrooms, or I can take a little whatever, and be there connected, enjoying it. And I don't think there is anything wrong with that, and I do practice that a lot.
Yeah, I prefer the word celebratory rather than recreation. So that word immediately makes it more acceptable. And next one on the list actually is San Pedro. So maybe you can continue, elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, somehow San Pedro I experience as more gentle than peyote somehow. That word comes to mind, but I wouldn't be able to elaborate too much on that. It's just words. But I do use it a lot in microdosing, in subperceptual microdosing. I take very little, so little that I don't really notice it, but I do feel it has a positive effect. The Wachuma, I feel also, I don't know, it's just a feeling. I don't have the the science to back it up, but I feel it's very healthy. I take it as I would take a supplement or something. But again, it's not based on some specific knowledge that I've acquired that shows. Although I'm sure there is some going around. I mean, and I'm sure all those alkaloids, because in the Western world we tend to identify these plants with a single active ingredient. And normally it's the most active one, the one that is most noticeable, in this case mescaline, and with these plants it tends to be the most psychoactive one. But I don't know if San Pedro Peyote, they have maybe 100 or over 100 alkaloids, that all of them do something in your system, and in subtle ways probably in your consciousness too. So I do have this feeling, my body tells me, that San Pedro, to take a few drops of San Pedro concoction every day or many days is healthy. But again, I do it in a dosage that is perceptual, definitely. Sometimes maybe I want to do a walk in nature and I take more and then perceive it, and it's a very gentle heart opener, connecting to everything type of spirit or vibration.
Yeah, I did my first San Pedro ceremony a few months ago, and it was very disorienting. The facilitator said that the first time is usually a little bit like that. I felt, first of all, you had to drink a lot, like almost 2.5 liters of this water-infused San Pedro. And I had some, strange vision. Someone said that there is something grotesque about San Pedro, and there was something confusing, a little bit also sexually dark. Like it reminded me a little bit of LSD in that sense. And then I'm so used to do the ayahuasca in a close ceremonial setting where you can't really leave the circle, where you're like guided all along from beginning to end. And that was the nature of San Pedro. Was, the facilitator said, like, go and walk in the forest and come back, and it was very free, and I felt a little bit like loss of guidance. Then I was a bit cold. Then I wasn't happy of the quarter where we were supposed to sleep. So that's, again, it's important, the setting of where are you mentally, you're going to be comfortable. If you start including expectation, it can be a disturbance. But I'm looking forward to the second round, and maybe we go together. Iboga.
Okay, Iboga is probably the strongest experience I've had other than Bufus, in the sense, and the strongest one by far, but like an order of magnitude stronger or more intense, where the observer remained, where I was there to experience something. I took a heroic dose for the first time. I went to a place in Mexico that specializes in the treatment of heroin addicts, by providing what they call a float dose, a very large dose of Iboga and Ibogaine, the active ingredient. And I went because I wanted to explore and have an experience with the medicine. I realized I've done it a second time here in Europe with people that come from a Gabonese tradition, while this one was not linked directly to its African origins, and it's been a lower dose, and it's been a more manageable experience. My first experience with this float dose, it was just as strong as it could be, and the visions and they were as real as any experience you can have, as us talking now here, and very intense. All sorts of things happen, and it lasted like 24 hours, and it was very interesting. I had some experiences that could be conceived as frightening, like a tarantula only centimeters away from my face, hanging from the ceiling. In perfect detail, I could see the mouth of the tarantula move and the legs and everything. And many things like that. I give this an example. I somehow had been primed to see spiders because somebody had described the experience to me and had mentioned a spider. So that was the word that would come to my mind when, Iboga. So I asked the facilitator, will I remember who I am all the time through the experience and what I've done, that the fact that I've taken Iboga? And he said yes, and then I thought, well, then I just need to remember to breathe and be centered again, because if it's me experiencing, if a big dragon comes or any type of monster or a big tarantula or whatever, and you remember that you've taken Iboga and that you're, in this case Alejandro, under a big dose of Iboga, then you just have to keep calm. If you forget, then it can be really scary. If you identify with it and then you think you have a real tarantula centimeters away from your face. I did remember all the time. I did manage to keep my cool, let's say, and it actually felt quite empowering. I felt really good about not being afraid of such a vivid, realistic tarantula so close. And that is only an example, because for most people it will be very easy to visualize the situation with a tarantula, but all sorts of things happen. Some of them amazing, some of them could be very frightening. And at one point I asked the medicine to show me my fear, and I was presented with image of a man coming over my wife. My first reaction was to think it was a lover, but then he attacked her with a knife, and then my elder son came to protect her and was also stabbed. But the medicine made that image blurry and small, while all the other images were crisp, clear. So I found the spirit very protective. So very vivid images, very a protective spirit. I think Iboga also it connects you to your body, or it puts your body in control. And I'd say I think we know in our bodies, which some people say we know in our hearts the answer to all the questions we ask. But mind comes along and distorts that answer, and sometimes we don't get to the true answer that our bodies know about because our mind provides a different one or provides a story that takes us in a different direction. And I think in my experience with Iboga, I don't know, like for example, I like coffee, but coffee doesn't do me well. If I drink coffee, it upsets my stomach, but I like it a lot. So many times, I've been tempted to drink coffee, and then I try not to remember that tea suits me better, and so on. After Iboga, if I look at a cup of coffee, if I think about a cup of coffee, my whole body contracts. I couldn't even, if I wanted, take one, I think. It's like my body rejects it. Same thing maybe for cigarettes. If I'm smoking cigarettes at the time, it's my body that reacts them. It's not. It creates for heroin addicts, which is one of the strongest addiction, if not the strongest addiction possible. It creates an addiction interruption window of months in which they just don't want heroin. Their body rejects the heroin. It's not without any withdrawal symptoms. It's a very, very powerful medicine that, in my case, I've always fantasized with the beautiful life I could live if I woke up early naturally. I'm more of a night person. I always have it takes a big effort for me to wake up early. and it's unpleasant. And then, I can do it, but it's unpleasant. It's not a... And I always fantasize, well, how nice it would be if I just woke up naturally at 6 a.m. every day, just open my eyes and be... And after my first Iboga experience, for the next 5-6 months, that's what happened. I will wake up at 6 in the morning, 5:36, and completely awake and energized. And then at 9 p.m. I will be falling asleep. I couldn't operate. I will just fall asleep completely. I will sleep really, really, really well for many months. It seems some metabolite of ibogaine stays in your liver for a few months, and that's the time that these effects, these physical effects, happen. But they are really, really positive. In my case, and in all the stories I've heard, they are just really positive effects in the sense that your body, you will be naturally in the place you want to be with regard to all the substances and all the foods and your body will be in control and keeping you away from the things that don't do you any good, and making you perceive the things that do you good. So a beautiful medicine.
Amazing. I mean, listening to you, I remember again once more to what extent this medicine, these plants are extremely important to develop an harmonious art of living. It's not just, now everybody's talking for the medicalization of this medicine for PTSD, depression, anxiety, and of course addiction, and of course that's very important. But you don't need to have an addiction or a anxiety or depression issue to enjoy this medicine, as you heard from Alejandro in all these different case, to what extent it helps refine relationships with the loved one, relationship with your body, relationship in community. And okay, we have the two last one, then I'll let you go. We have Kanna.
Kanna, this is I came in contact with it only a few years back. It's a flower from South Africa. I took it the first time in pills, where it had been mixed with some other things that you can buy over the counter legally, supplement stores and so on, and produced this very intense sort of MDMA-like effect, but fully medicinal in the sense that the next day you felt really, really good, and 2 days later and 3 days later, and I was shocked because it was beautiful. It came from some guy out of LA that had done some alchemy with it, and it was hard for me to believe that they had not put MDMA or other substances into the pill, because it felt so good and so similar. Then a couple of years later, a friend connected me to some very high quality Kanna, because it's legal, so you can buy Kanna over the internet. Normally it will come in powder, and I did, but the effect was not anywhere close to the effect I've had that first time. And then this friend connected me to this like really, really nice Kanna in liquid form, just Kanna, no other additives, but an order of magnitude better in terms of the experience than any other Kanna I've tried. And it's really, really nice. It connects you. It's a heart opener again. It can be, it's sensual. It's in the same way MDMA can be. It gets you into this nice spot. It's really good for sex or intimacy. It's it's a like subtle effect. It works better on an empty stomach. The effect is reinforced by cacao, alcohol, food, and alcohol specifically kill the effect. And if you try to do more, you start to become nauseous. And so there's this sweet spot in which just a little, you put a couple of drops under your tongue, and it's very nice. And again, it shows how much medicine there is out there, and how, I don't know, how little information or what, like our culture is being monopolized by alcohol in terms of mind-altering substances. Well, alcohol and caffeine, maybe that's the two accepted. And then there are so many other drugs that nasty drugs or drugs that bring a lot of trouble with them, and that's that leads me to the next one, because I generally speaking, I see cocaine as not having a very positive effect on the people that take it, even while on the drug, which I find interesting, because when people take heroin, they have this extremely pleasurable moment, and then when the moment the effect runs out, they want more, and that creates all sorts of problems. But with cocaine, I constantly see around me people taking it becoming less interesting than 2 minutes before they took it. And it's not a drug that I think is bringing a lot of benefits to society and to the people that take it. On the other hand, the coca leaf, the coca plant, is revered as one of the master plants, the most medicinal plants, same level as ayahuasca, and interestingly enough, tobacco, in the shamanic cultures in the Amazon, and it is a really, really amazing, beautiful medicine, and with lots of physical and psychological positive effects. It gives you energy, makes you eat less, it makes you listen, just to compare with the effects of cocaine. And it's taken. I've taken it, and I enjoy taking it a lot as Mambe, where they mix it with something to bring the alkaloids out. Normally, some ashes or some crushed shells, but it's the coca leaf in powder form, and some other element that helps bring the alkaloids out, and it is a beautiful, beautiful medicine. It helps centering, it helps listening, it helps connecting, it gives energy. It's a session of a conversation with friends doing Mambe can be beautiful. And in many of the tribes that use it, they will get together and take Mambe and discuss all the things that need to be discussed in the community. And you can see how people are doing the Mambe, and then somebody talks, and maybe talks for 15 minutes. And when that person finished talking, everybody else continues doing the Mambe and going, like meditating on what has been said for 5 or 10 minutes of silence, and then somebody will go, okay, what I think, and then continue. How different that is from people in our society. We're always waiting for the other person to breathe, to step in, because it's already, instead of true listening, we're like making the answers in our head to what is being said, and Mambe helps with that. So and now look at with technology and a reductionist approach, we've taken from that beautiful plant a very powerful active ingredient. We've mixed it and processed it with all sorts of chemicals, and come out with something that has lost the magic along the way and the health benefits, and it's just this big upper ego boosting substance. And so it's funny that this is one of the few plants that are illegal around the world, the plant itself. And not only is that extremely disrespectful for the local cultures that have used it medicinally and socially for thousands of years, but also very short-sighted, because it is a very powerful medicinal positive thing to bring into our diet. And somehow we in the Western world create this technology-driven spin-off that is unhealthy and dangerous, and then we make illegal a plant, which just making plants illegal should be, who are you? Something like that. But anyway, that's a different subject.
Yeah, amazing. This has been super interesting. I mean, I can't help to add one last remark, which has to do with something we've been talking about. You know, when you have healthcare system for profit, a healed patient is not a good customer. So I think that's why some of these plants are illegal. I really want to thank you because, you know, the objective of this podcast is to taking off the stigma and helping people understanding this psychedelic medicine, these natural plants or even lab compound, but that have similar effect. I think that there is a lot of possible application of this compound for wellness, for art of living, for life design. And so thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge. I want to invite you again. We discuss it to discuss about tantra, possibly with your wife. So I have to do my homework. I have to read the book that you recommended, and then we'll meet up again. Is there anything that comes to mind that you want to share with listeners that are curious about this medicine and maybe want to ask you, okay, I haven't done anything yet, where should I start? Something like that?
Well, I think these are these substances to different degrees, but they are not to be taken lightly. They are very powerful substances that should be dealt with respect and humility. And I think it's in the same way. There's some extreme sports. It's not only okay, it's great to do them, but you have to be respectful, you have to be careful. It's good to be in the company of more experienced people. Set and setting are extremely important, and it's also the dosage makes all the difference. So you know, it's good to get used to treat it in the same way. Okay, if you want to do parapenting or you want to do parachuting or surf with big wave surfing or something, okay, start with the small waves, start with someone that knows how to surf well and learn, but don't let most of these substances they have an inherent goodness about them. If in the ancestral cultures that use them, they believe, in the case of plant medicine, they believe plants have a spirit, and the spirit in volition. That means plants have an agenda. Plants want things, and these plants are benevolent spirits, and these plants generally will help you and will provide. Yes, they will be a positive force in your life. Just understand that we're talking about a lot of things that sustain your current identity and your current life may be challenged or shattered by these experiences, and that's not always easy to integrate. And so I will say I would urge caution at the same time that I have to say I'm a big fan of what these substances can bring to us as individuals and as a collective.
Yeah. And so start with a small wave, take the gradual aspect, and see you soon, guys. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Koka sunarai sunarayenti. 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 Koka sunarai sunarayenti.